What's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. Before we get into the bodybuilding stories, we have a pretty significant strength story to talk about today. The deadlift world record has unofficially been broken. So this is the heaviest deadlift really ever recorded in or outside of competition. I haven't seen anybody do anything over 500 kgs besides Thor. And this was done by Mr. Deadlift is his handle on Instagram. His name is Christoph Wiersbicki. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. The deadlift was 502.5 kilos or 1,107 pounds, which is exactly 1.5 kilos heavier than Hafthor Bjornsson's world record deadlift, which was done, some people consider it unofficial, but it was done technically officially. And it's 2.5 kilos heavier than Eddie Hall's world record deadlift, which was prior to Hafthor's, which was 500 kilos. Now, a couple of interesting things here. The first being the fact that it was pulled sumo instead of conventional. Both Hafthor and Eddie pulled conventional for their deadlift world records. And I know there's often a lot of debate about the difference between a sumo and conventional deadlift. Some people say that sumo is easier. I think Jeff Nippert actually just did a video on this topic just like a day or so ago. But I think what impressed most people about this, and I also should mention that everybody used straps, Eddie, Thor, and Christoph. What I'm not sure of, though, is if Christoph is wearing a deadlift suit in this video. It's really kind of hard to tell, but it doesn't look like it to me. And I think the thing that a lot of people took away from this was the ease that it looked like he performed this deadlift. Now, it was unofficial. I do want to make that clear. So right now, Thor still holds the official record, but this is pretty big. We haven't seen anybody do any kind of numbers like this since Hafthor. So it's possible that in the very near future, we see Christoph perform a world record deadlift in an actual competition and break that official world record. He was a guy that, he was on some people's radars, but I think a lot of people were looking at Ivan Makarov as maybe potentially being the guy to break Thor's record. And I think Ivan, his best deadlift in competition was like high 400s, 400 kilos high. So this is really impressive, and I just want to start out the video with this. So shout out to Mr. Deadlift on the 502.5 kilo unofficial new heaviest deadlift ever recorded. Now, next up in the news, let's get into these bodybuilding stories here. So we've been talking a lot about the Arnold Classic Brazil, which is happening this weekend. First of all, the competitor list has been updated since we spoke yesterday. The competitor list yesterday only had 6 competitors. They've posted an updated version to include 9 total competitors. So they added 3 names to that list, one of them being Emir Omaragic, who we talked about in yesterday's video, despite the fact he wasn't on the list yet. Another guy that was added to this list, so I'll give you guys the names of the guys that were added. Well, I'll just read you guys the whole list. Thiago Lins, Audio, Vitor, Hugo, Boff, Alan Ramiro, Bondaman, Rafael Brandao, Marcelo Pedro de Cruz, Sibusiso Cotello, William Martins, Emir Omaragic, and Eduardo Rodriguez. So William Martins was the guy that I wanted to talk about that was added to this list. He's another guy that a lot of people have been talking about. He's got a really impressive physique, specifically his side profile is crazy. He recently posted a side chest, and I believe this was from this week, so during his peak week, so a very recent update. And his side profile is extraordinarily impressive, particularly in that pose. Crazy thickness in his legs, crazy glute hamstring separation, glute hamstring tie-in, and then quad hamstring separation. His arms, his shoulders, his chest, I mean, everything looks crazy in the side profile. I think this was the shot that really got a lot of people talking about him potentially being a threat at this show. But again, I wasn't sure until they updated the list that he was for sure going to be there. He is for sure going to be there competing now. So that being said, in comparison to yesterday's video, I would add his name to the conversation of guys that I'm looking at as potential first call-out guys. We've obviously talked at length about Rafael Brandao. I think he's probably the favorite to win here. Sibusiso Cotello, he looks insanely impressive. I'll go ahead and show another recent picture from him. I mean, his conditioning looks really, really good, and we've already talked a lot about his shape, his structure. He's got a beautiful flow to his physique, but his conditioning, certainly at this point during his peak week prep, it looks incredible. So he's definitely one of the guys that I'm looking at as top 2, top 3. William Martins, and then we also talked yesterday about Emir Omaragic. So those are kind of the guys that I'm looking at right now. That would probably be my tentative top 4 at the Arnold Classic Brazil based on what we know so far. And with the way that this list has changed, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more names added to the list but before we get to the actual show, which is in a couple days now. But I want to go ahead and pivot to some other shows that are coming up that we're a little bit more familiar with, the Indy Pro and the New York Pro, two really big Olympia qualifiers. Like I said, the Arnold Classic Brazil is also an Olympia qualifier, but assuming that Rafael wins that show, him being the favorite, he's already qualified. I think there's a good likelihood that at the Indy Pro or at the New York Pro, we're going to see two new names added to that Olympia qualified competitor list. So Justin Rodriguez is a guy that we've talked about a lot. He posted this physique update, and I think this is noteworthy because we're coming up on the 2 weeks out mark. So this weekend will mark 2 weeks from the Indy Pro, and that's where we're first going to see Justin. So Justin posted this physique update today. He also posted a physique update a couple days ago saying that people were saying that he looks off compared to his previous prep, like he doesn't look as sharp as he usually looks. He says in this most recent update that he's weighing 276.7, and he says this was taken at exactly 18 days out, and he's looking to keep his title for another year. He won last year's New York Pro 2021, or Indy Pro 2021. And I will say that I agree with him. I think that peak week for Justin is really the week that he posts the most impressive updates. I think it was kind of a slow progression for him going into the Arnold Classic. A lot of the updates looked fairly the same. Then he got to peak week and he started posting really crazy looking updates. So while throughout most of this prep leading up to the Indy show, a lot of the updates have kind of looked the same. His weight has been relatively the same. Granted, he just came off that Boston Pro show not too long ago. I think it's probably not going to be until peak week right before the Indy Pro that we really see him really tighten up and his conditioning start to really look a lot sharper than we're seeing in these updates. So I think he's on track. I think he's on par. And I don't think that he looks off. I think you're going to see the same thing that we saw from him peak week for the Arnold. Crazy, grainy, gnarly, vascular looking updates. But of course, another guy that will be competing in that Indy Pro lineup, the boogeyman, Blessing Awodibu, posting 2 updates of his own today at 2.5 weeks out. This time, updates of his back, one of his more impressive body parts. Crazy width, crazy size. His back, specifically his back width, is one of the things that gives him a more commanding presence on stage, and that's one of the things that I think draws eyeballs to his physique. When he is on stage, you can see his legs here, you can see his glutes, you can see his hamstrings. His glutes look to be, you can see some striation, but not a whole lot. Again, this is 2.5 weeks out. But I think overall, it looks pretty comparable to what we saw from Justin, and Justin is the king of condition. I mean, he's looked pretty good at the past couple shows he's done. So I think that's a good sign for Blessing. And again, I've just said this at length throughout the whole build-up for the show. That the main thing I'm going to be looking for Blessing is increased size to his lower body to match kind of the overwhelming size that his upper body has. Kind of hard to tell in these updates whether or not he's achieved that. His legs certainly don't look bad in these updates. You got to give him that. But we're not really going to know how much he's improved the lower body till we see him on stage next to other guys and see his legs compared to some of the other guys' legs on stage, whether or not he's made improvements. But from a conditioning standpoint, from a detail standpoint, separation of his legs looks good. Detail in his back looks really good. And size, particularly in the upper body, certainly not an issue for Blessing Awodibu. And the third guy that I've really got my eye on for the Indy Pro, and honestly, I think this is the best I've seen him look. Charles Griffin posting this physique update, this being his most recent update posted today, so less than 2.5 weeks out from that Indy Pro show. I think he looks phenomenal here, and like I said, I think this is probably the best version of Charles that I've seen in these updates. Again, he's working with Matt Jansen, and it's no secret that Matt Jansen was able to coach Nick Walker to some tremendous success very early on in his pro career. He obviously coached Sean Clarita to a 212 Olympia victory, and it looks like he's working some magic on Charles Griffin because honestly, I'm very impressed with what we're seeing from Charles so far. And again, it's been a while since we've seen him on stage. Maybe he's made a lot of improvements in that time. I expect big things from him at this show. I think there's a potential that he could win the show, depending on how he looks in the lineup next to these guys. I'm very impressed. He looks grainy, he looks hard, he looks vascular, and I think he's going to give Justin and Blessing a serious run for their money at the Indy Pro. Yeah, that's all I can really say. I'm impressed with Charles, and I think a lot of people will be when he takes the stage in Indy. So that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you did, in fact, enjoy it. Please make sure you give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Like the video if you liked the video. Hit that subscribe button if you have not subscribed yet already. Click the notification bell to be notified every time I upload. And as always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.